you ever been forced to take 5 30-minute naps in one day? That's actually how I was diagnosed with narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is a sleep disorder that is complex, hard to diagnose, and can be difficult to live with. As a person with narcolepsy, I can apply my personal experience to the research that I've done for this assignment. So today I'm going to give you a brief overview of the disorder. I'll tell you why it's difficult to diagnose it, and I'll give you a little bit of insight of what it's like to live with it. So now, let's get started with a brief overview. Narcolepsy is caused by the lack of hypocretin in the brain, which regulates sleep. There are two main symptoms: excessive daytime sleepiness and cataplexy. Cataplexy is a sudden loss of muscle control as a result of an emotional response. And I do actually have an example of it right here. So as you can see, she's just going through a regular normal exercise. Everything seems normal, and then suddenly she collapses. She's a bit dazed and confused. She doesn't really know where she is right now. And she actually falls into a sleep attack and is just completely out. It's hard to watch, definitely. There are two types of narcolepsy. Type 1, narcolepsy with cataplexy, and type 2, narcolepsy without cataplexy. Both of them can experience excessive daytime sleepiness. I have type 2, which means that my only symptom is excessive daytime sleepiness. Narcolepsy is somewhat rare. The National Institute of Neurological Disorders estimates that 130 to 200,000 people in America have narcolepsy, but many cases go undiagnosed, and I'll tell you why that is. It can be tricky to diagnose narcolepsy. The main symptom is excessive daytime sleepiness, which is something that everybody has felt at least once in their life. It's difficult to know when your tiredness is abnormal. Also, there are other things like stress, depression, and diet that can cause tiredness. When I was trying to figure out what was wrong with me, we went to several specialists. We thought it was depression or maybe an iron deficiency, and it turned out that it was narcolepsy. Narcolepsy can also be difficult for clinical diagnosis. In their 2010 book, Narcolepsy, Symptoms, Causes, and Diagnosis, Guillermo Santos and Lothar Viaba describe clinical evaluation of narcolepsy to be difficult because the symptoms vary and only 10% of patients actually experience all symptoms. I'll give you a little anecdote about my personal experience. When I was diagnosed, I was hooked up to a machine and they monitored my weight brains on an overnight trial. And since they couldn't find anything abnormal, the next day I had to stay and do 5 30-minute naps with an hour in between of each one. I ended up falling asleep within 3 minutes of the beginning of each nap, and I immediately went into REM sleep, which is the deepest part of sleep. So that's kind of an idea of how it is to get diagnosed. So now I'll go into what it's like to live with it. Narcolepsy is exhausting. It's portrayed in media as a funny gag. There's always the old person character that, it suddenly falls asleep and they're like, oh, Uncle Jimmy. But it really is more than that. In their July 2020 article, Living with Narcolepsy, Emily C. Barker and her 4 co-writers found that children and teens are more likely at risk of depression, aggressiveness, and poor work performance. Imagine being tired all day and going throughout your normal daily routine. It'd be difficult to get a lot of the work done and dealing with all the stress of life. Another point I wanted to take was, I don't have cataplexy, so I wanted to get an experience of what it's like for somebody to live with it. A high schooler with type 1, Charlie Foeking, wrote a newspaper titled The Realities of Narcolepsy. frustrated with his family because they laugh at him whenever he has a cataplexy attack. He describes it as being very difficult. He's afraid to drive. He's afraid to hold his sister's children because he fears that if he has a cataplexy attack, he may hurt somebody in the process. So now that we've talked about the main topic, let's review. Narcolepsy causes excessive daytime sleepiness and cataplexy. It can be difficult to diagnose, and it can also be difficult to live with. And it should be taken seriously. Many disorders like narcolepsy have symptoms that are invisible to others. If we have a better understanding of these symptoms, we can be more respectful to one another, and which is needed especially in these divided times. Thank you.